Well, maybe give us a touch more on the evolution across 11 editions, because when you first started going, or certainly, 90s, we wouldn't have had a huge number of African players in the Premier League versus now. So in that sense, the profile of player is higher. We saw an African team in a World Cup semi-final, which might lead us to blindly assume the overall standard is shooting up in accordance. What are your observations, Jonathan, on the evolution across the 11 tournaments you've attended?
Well, we'll see what happens with Morocco getting to the semi-final. It may be that once that threshold has been crossed, it becomes easier for those coming later. But my sense, certainly before the World Cup, was that, if anything, the level of African football among the best sides has dipped relative to the rest of the world. I think what's definitely happened is that the sort of middle class in Africa has got a lot better. And I think we've seen that at this tournament, the fact that the likes of Mozambique, Cape Verde, are able to beat or draw with the giants of the continent. That wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. But you look at some of those teams in 2002, and we've just come off the decade when you had, 12 years, I guess, when you had Cameroon getting to the World Cup quarterfinal in 1990, which for me, I think is still the most thrilling African story at a World Cup. You'd had Cameroon and Nigeria both won Olympic golds in Nigeria in 96, Cameroon in 2000. That Cameroon squad, you had Patrick Mboma. Was Samuel Eto'o in that squad, or did he come from in the next one? But certainly sort of on the fringes. You had Jeremy. It was a squad with a lot of well-known players. Nigeria, it was an amazing squad. Sunday Lise, JJ Kocha, Kanu, Taribo West. That Senegal squad, who of course got to the World Cup and would beat France in the opening game of the World Cup 6 months later, with El Hadji Diouf and Khalil Fadiga and Pape Bouba Diop. So those three squads, it really felt like African football was a chance of it really making a breakthrough at the World Cup. And I don't really think it has. And I know people will talk about Ghana's achievement in 2010. So before this most recent World Cup, and Morocco's achievement, there'd been three African sides that got to the quarterfinals. I mean, Cameroon in 1990, Senegal in 2002, Ghana in 2010. And Ghana, of course, with a Luis Suarez handball away from being the first African side to reach the semi-final. And of course, that was an egregious offence. And if he hadn't cheated, then they would have got there. But at the same time, in that tournament, in South Africa, so the only African World Cup, there were 6 African entrants. 5 of them went out in the group stage, and Ghana themselves would have gone out in the group stage had Serbia been awarded a penalty against Australia for handball, which they should have been awarded, and had they converted it. So we could easily have had this utter humiliation in the home World Cup, for want of a slightly better phrase, of all 6 going out in the groups. And what's followed, I don't think, has been hugely impressive in terms of the national teams, although, as you point out, we're now seeing African players playing in the Premier League or the Bundesliga or Liga. It's a normal, natural thing we don't even think about.